Hello everyone, welcome to my Resident Evil 4 Remake, Professional Difficulty, S+, no damage, no nuke impulse items, no charms, worse through. This will cover chapters 1 through 6, and what you'll be seeing is a supercut of gameplay where I will only be showing the moments where I am dealing with enemies, any moments where I am picking up items or treasure, and I will also be speeding up or removing any moments where the gameplay drags out longer than necessary, or any moments where there's nothing worth talking about with the gameplay. And that is how this will go with this video and for the rest of the videos in this Wars Through. But we are now getting started on the village fight. I'm just going to run past these enemies. You don't have to run past these enemies. I mean, what you can do is just sit by this door and wait for the enemies to go away and then stealth kill the guy that's inside that hut and then pick up the flash grenade if you want to. But of course, the enemies are moving the entire time when you're in that previous area. So I wanted this to go consistently, so that's why I skip it. And what you're going to be seeing right now is not the original stealth strategy or the updated stealth strategy that I showcased in separate videos for Resident Evil 4 Remake. This is a brand new method that I'm showing for stealth. So I fire my gun right there 3 times to get the enemies to move to that spot. Some of them are going to go exactly to where I shot. Other ones will just choose to line up in a line and just not be near the noise. But the second time I fire my gun, they will all cluster around the noise. I don't know why the time when you shoot your gun is important to allow the enemies to cluster, but just go with it. Then I'm going to pick up the grenade. I'm going to fire my gun right over here because I will cluster the enemies over to this spot. And as soon as they see me and I enter combat and I use the grenade, it will contribute to the kill counter that will allow the sequence to end a lot faster and for the reinforcements to spawn in. And also, I'll be very close to the house with the shotgun and the grenade. So that is why I'm doing it from this position, and immediately the reinforcements have spawned in. I'm going to take the time to finish off any stragglers, so this guy is still around. I mean, I could have probably just ran for the house immediately and just dealt with him when he was climbing the ladder, and I could just use the shotgun against him. But I didn't want to take that chance. And see how there's less enemies I have to deal with when I'm making my way to this house. That's why I do it from that position there. So now what I'm going to do is pick up the shotgun and the grenade. I'm just going to sit by this ladder right over here. So the enemies, they're all going to climb up this ladder. Some of the enemies might choose to climb up behind you, but that all depends on where they are initially when you first trigger the cutscene where the Chainsaw Man spawns in. But just stay by this ladder and the enemies will be focused on climbing this ladder, and so will the Chainsaw Man. The Chainsaw Man will not choose to bust through the door. He will instead climb the ladder. And if he decides to climb the ladder, just kick the ladder and then focus on the enemies behind you. But with the amount of kills I've already contributed to the kill counter before entering this house, I should be able to end the sequence very quickly just using the 8 shotgun shells that I have. And if not, I do have 1 grenade in case I need to finish off more enemies. So there's the Chainsaw Man. I'm going to kick the ladder, and then I'm going to focus my attention on any enemies banging on the windows or any enemy coming up the stairs. If they decide to come up the stairs, I need to jump through this window right over here, and they're going to stack up right next to the window, and they're going to be very delayed in trying to get through the window, so I can use either my shotgun or my grenades to my advantage, and I'll be able to end the sequence very quickly. This guy is going to die very soon, and this will be the end of the village fight. So that's definitely the best method I have for the village fight. And at least there are some stealth elements that I'm introducing with this strategy, because the developers of this game were too incompetent to program better stealth for this sequence. And if you try to just stealth past the enemies and get to the door that leads to the next area, every single enemy will know where you are. If you go to the center area, if you go to a specific threshold that is right near the way out of here, you'll just cause all the enemies to know where you are, the doors will be locked, and you'll be forced into combat. I don't understand why the precedent set at the start of the game is that the stealth doesn't matter, when in many of the marketing material for Resident Evil 4 Remake, they were advertising the importance of the stealth. Classic new Capcom design, almost like how they glamorized that guarding in Resident Evil Village will be important when it was not important whatsoever in Resident Evil Village, and the push mechanic was absolutely useless in Resident Evil Village as well. But having done all that, we now have a bit of a breather, so I'm just going to take the time to pick up some supplies. I'm also going to dispatch the enemies in this area because they will not support the Brute when he spawns in. And also, the additional enemies that spawn when you trigger the Brute, they're not going to be aware of you immediately. So this is why I get rid of these enemies, because they're the only enemies that are going to aggro on you when the Brute is chasing you. The other enemies will not aggro onto you immediately unless they see you. That is very important to note. So I'm just going to take the time to pick up the supplies right over here. Once the brute spawns in, I'm going to get through the door. I'm not going to use the explosive on him, even though I probably should have, and just finish him off with the knife and the shotgun, because he will chase you all the way. It's just I didn't want to dilly-dally too much in this area, because this would have given the additional enemies plenty of time to set up in a position where they would have spotted me as I'm making my way across the bridge, and they would have supported the brute. It's pretty awkward the way they've designed this sequence, but what can you really do? Because that's just how this entire pre-alpha is. But having said all that, I'm just going to go on a different tangent, and I'm just going to talk about the incentives for why I actually decided to do this worst through again. So, if you are familiar with my channel, you'll know that I did another worst through a Resident Evil 4 remake earlier, and it was a professional difficulty, no damage, no new game plus items, no charms, no merchant worst through, and I just gave up on the no merchant thing. I didn't want to indulge myself with this pre-alpha of a game any further, and also because Sadler is the worst final boss ever made in the entire Resident Evil series. He has so much life, he is so uncreative, the developers devoted little to no time to Sadler's boss fight. It's like he's an unfinished fight. He has no Visador supporting him, and even though they die very quickly after like one bullet, even with non-upgraded weapons, it's still not enough for salvaging ammunition for Sadler, and they are just a nuisance, and they just spawn out of the blue, and there can be so many of them active at once, and unless you have a flash grenade to stop Sadler from spawning in more Navisadors, you are completely screwed. And all this together made me not want to respect Sadler at all. I just used the rocket launcher against him because if the developers are going to not respect the original version of Resident Evil 4 properly and not respect Sadler and how amazing his final boss fight was in the original version of Resident Evil 4, then why should I give any respect to what they designed in this entire pre-alpha of a game? I'm not going to put up with it. So that's why I used the rocket launcher against Sadler, just to end him, because he is a piece of garbage fight. And then this leads me on to the worst through that you're seeing right now, where the restrictions are the same, but I'm using the merchant, and there are a couple of reasons for this. So the first thing is, I wanted to actually see what the overall balancing of this game was like on professional difficulty when you were using the merchant. The second thing is, I wanted to hate on the merchant from a more informed context, and how can I hate on the merchant if I don't use him? Like, the merchant just causes new Capcom to be lackadaisical and lazy with how they design certain sections, and a lot of the sections on this game feel rigidly designed with certain weapons in mind that feel only possible if you have the merchant. And there are a lot of sequences on this game that, for instance, need a lot of flash grenades, and if you buy the crafting recipe for flash grenades, you're going to amass on so many flash grenades because the game drops a lot of large resources, and I can't really understand how large resources have a greater drop rate compared to small resources. That really doesn't make any sense to me. But when you use large resources plus 5 gunpowder, you will always make flash grenades, and you can amass on so many. Like, I've never had this many flash grenades before in any of my playthroughs of Resident Evil 4 Remake, ever. It's insane. But it also highlights just how badly balanced this entire game is, and how much the sections are so rigidly designed with those kind of playstyles in mind. And I really feel like it becomes a pay-to-win system in the process. And it just feels like the charm system as well validates this whole idea. And I can't really understand why they put in the charms for Resident Evil 4 Remake. Like, all the charms feel like is just microtransactions, literally, like XP gains and all this kind of stuff. That's what they feel like. Like, I can't really understand why they would favor this kind of mechanic that makes the game feel more like a mobile game than a single-player focused game. And they're using those kind of charms to amend the fundamentals so that you have greater firepower, or greater drop rates, or all this other stuff. I mean, it's really stupid. It presents as such a jarring disconnect from a single-player focused game, and I can't understand why new Capcom would favor this idea. Like, how can they favor this kind of idea for providing replayability to this game? Why don't you actually design a better game that actually has very fun scenarios, very fun mechanics, rather than the typical microtransaction model? Just all this pay-to-win garbage, all these really cheap substitutes to actual diverse gameplay. I mean, the gameplay is still the same, but you just have charms now that give additional benefits that don't change the gameplay much, or they don't provide much diversity in thought. Like, I don't understand why they would do this. It's so stupid. And I don't even indulge with the shooting range whatsoever. I don't see the point. And I have no intention of doing so ever in any of my playthroughs of Resident Evil 4 Remake. And yeah, what I mentioned about replayability especially, I really need to discuss that as well. Because honestly, guys, I would say this Resident Evil game feels less replayable than any other Resident Evil game ever. I don't know how, but this game feels so stale. and so mundane and so bare bones and everything that I just cannot find a lot of incentive to return to this game. Like, once you find the strategies and once you just do all the really stale, boring sequences, and there are so many chapters on this game that feel so poorly paced and poorly handled and poorly designed that it just kills a lot of the replayability, and I can't really find myself wanting to replay certain sections. Like, the only thing I ever really replay is just Torres Mendez's boss fight. There's no incentive to really, like, replay the other bosses. I mean, aside from Krauser, though, but the only reason I even replay Krauser is just for the first and second phase, and then the third phase is just nothing. And even then, the first and second phases can get very stale after a while. I mean, it's just so dumb that they could just make the gameplay this stale and repetitive and boring and just lacking in terms of creativity. Like, they just devoted little to no time to making this game stand on its own two legs, and instead they have to give all these cheap charms, and they just make everything feel so dependent upon the merchant. It's all just so lacking in creativity. I can't explain it properly in this video. Maybe in my review of Resident Evil 4 Remake it'll come across a lot better. I really don't know what to say, guys, but I'm just finding less incentive to come back to this remake, and I know that's probably redundant for me to say because I absolutely despise this game, but even the most despicable games can have parts that are worth replaying, or any kind of hook that actually makes you want to come back to it, even though you absolutely hate it. But this game doesn't really feel like it, though. It's just like a Resident Evil 2 remake and Resident Evil 3 remake and Resident Evil 1 remake. It just seems to be the trend with all these remakes. Like, they become so bare bones and everything. Like, at least with Resident Evil 2 Remake and 3 Remake, they were particularly designed with speedrunning in mind, and once you figure them out, and especially with Resident Evil 2 Remake with the knife-only thing, there was never any incentive to go back, and then Resident Evil 3 Remake was just a very short game with not a lot of content to it. There's not really a lot of need to go back to that game, and Resident Evil 1 Remake, obviously it's self-explanatory why I would never really go back to Resident Evil 1 Remake. And this game is following that same trend. I cannot believe new Capcom could just resort to this kind of stale gameplay loop for Resident Evil 4 Remake, and then have some of the worst combat systems ever for a Resident Evil game in this particular pre-alpha of a game. That's really all I have to say about that. And like I said, there's going to be more to say about this when I get to my review of Resident Evil 4 Remake. And like I said, all of this is incentive for me to partake in this worst through, to really get a lot of my thoughts out, to really get a lot of the objective claims I have towards this remake out. So that's why I'm doing it. But we are still making our way through Chapter 3 right now. I'm also going to be partaking in the merchant request right here, so there are a couple of side objectives you can do based on blue posters that you can find. And they're all pretty repetitive. Like, a lot of them are just kill rats, or destroy blue metals, or find an egg, or defeat this tough enemy, even though it's just a reskin of a previous enemy. I mean, I know, like, the golden Maduro is a little bit different, and I'm guessing that dog that you encounter in Chapter 5 is a little different. I don't know. I don't really see a lot of the need to deal with those kind of additional enemies. It doesn't do anything to salvage this replayability factor with this game. The replayability is just so mundane with this entire game. Like, I just don't know what to say, guys. But yeah, we're just still continuing on, just running past enemies. Yeah, you're not going to see me use the merchant immediately, and also, you might have noticed that I didn't buy the sniper rifle from Chapter 2. It's because I didn't really feel the need to get the sniper rifle for these early chapters. I only start to use the sniper rifle in Chapter 7. I know you can get the scope for the sniper rifle for free in Chapter 2, but I didn't really see that as additional incentive for me to even get the sniper rifle this early on. I just saw it as being too similar to what other people would do for Chapter 2, and also I just felt like I would better allocate my resources and money to other things rather than just buying a worthless sniper rifle when it's going to be worth something in Chapter 7, because the sniper rifle you get in Chapter 7 is okay, but of course it still has those issues where it doesn't instantly kill enemies with headshots. The enemies just shrug off the sniper rifle when they choose to, and whenever the enemies are grabbing onto Ashley as well, the sniper rifle, it doesn't knock them over after one shot. You have to pump in multiple shots to get enemies to drop Ashley. It's really stupid. And there were a couple of moments in Chapter 7 where I accidentally killed Ashley in that double switch sequence because of the fact that the enemies would not let her go. And it was just causing me to get very impatient. It was just causing me to accidentally hit her. And I even had one instance where I wasn't even aiming at Ashley and she somehow died. I'm going to be reserving all these bloopers for another Poor Designs video, and after that, I don't know if there's going to be more Poor Designs videos for Resident Evil 4 Remake. Obviously, when the Separate Ways DLC releases, there will probably be more poor designs to showcase, because I'm sure the Separate Ways DLC will come with its own poor designs and other dumb moments, but given how short Separate Ways was in the original version of Resident Evil 4, it might be equally as short, and I doubt they're going to do anything special with the story, and that's probably another avenue I can take my poor designs of Resident Evil 4 Remake series. I could probably discuss a lot of the story issues, a lot of the moments with the characters, maybe take segments from my blind playthrough and put them into their own video, just to get the points across properly. Like, I was thinking of doing a video titled Leon is so dumb, and just showcase a lot of the moments from the cutscenes in my blind playthrough, just showcasing how much Leon acts so out of character, and the genuine reactions I had when I noticed those moments where he was acting so far out of character. It'll definitely be the first time I ever do anything like this for a YouTube video on my channel. So yeah, stay tuned for that as a possibility. But I've just done that sequence, just run past everything. There is no need for upgrades right now. And I guess because I did the no merchant thing already, a lot of the incentive to indulge in the merchant this early on was not really there. As soon as I get to Chapter 7, there was definitely some incentive. Although, technically in Chapters 5 and 6, I did buy the crafting recipes for flash grenades, and I also bought the riot gun, and Ether was not kidding about the riot gun. The riot gun is exceedingly powerful, and even unupgraded, it's still a very powerful weapon. I can definitely see why people consider it to be such a powerful weapon, and at times it can be a lot more powerful than the new sniper rifle you get in Chapter 7, which is mind-boggling because sniper rifles have always been considered to be the powerhouse weapons compared to shotguns. And it's a shame that the riot gun doesn't really help much with the crowd control, but it is very good at getting decapitations and dealing a lot of damage. But the fact that they restricted to the merchant as well, like, I just can't understand why they would restrict so many fundamental mechanics to the merchant. And like I said, my Resident Evil Village review better elucidates what I'm trying to say about the merchant and how much a lot of the fundamental mechanics are consolidated within him, and the developers didn't want to do any work whatsoever with actually rearranging the enemy placements, with rearranging the ammunition placements, with rearranging the weapon placements on the higher difficulties. Yeah, I guess that's another reason as well why this game doesn't have much replayability, because professional difficulty is very identical to hardcore difficulty, and if you played hardcore difficulty, a lot of the enemy placements are very similar between hardcore and professional difficulty. They don't rearrange the item placements, they don't rearrange the enemy placements, and it's all because why do that when a lot of the mechanics are consolidated to the merchant? What's the point of rearranging ammunition when you can just buy like crafting recipes for ammunition, or just buy crafting resources? You can't buy gunpowder unless you use the trade system. But getting back on track, the merchant just allowed the developers to do less work and not really indulge much with making the difficulty interesting or making this game interesting. So yeah, a lot to say about that. But right now, guys, I'm just dealing with Delago. This time I no damaged him. And if you actually get into those moments where you stand still and you're having to hit Delago, after that attack where he tries to hit you where you're standing still, he regains HP. So that's why I get those moments where Delago doesn't seem to die very fast. It's because he regains HP every time he finishes doing the attack where he tries to attack you when you're sitting still in the water. And this attack is happening right now. So after this attack, after I stun him, and he retreats back into the water, he will regain HP. He regains 400 HP every time he retreats back into the water after this move. I don't understand why the developers designed it like this, because it doesn't make any sense. Why would they intentionally try to drag out Delago longer than necessary? Makes no sense, guys. But he's going to be dead in about 30 seconds, so I'll just go on a different tangent. So, S+. S+ rank is as follows. You have to beat the game under a certain time limit. It varies depending on the difficulty, and you also have to make sure you beat it using no more than 15 saves. So in the case of professional difficulty, you have to beat the game in under 5 hours and 30 minutes using no more than 15 saves. That's really it in terms of S+. It's just all based on speed running and not using that many saves. It's not representative of the game as a whole. Like, I can't understand why developers insist upon this very simple ranking system where it's not representative of the full gameplay experience. What does speeding through the game have anything to do with the game as a whole? Is that really what they view this game? Just the game that you speed through and never return to again, and you're not caring about all the other designs put in place? It's the most lazy form of ranking possible, and I don't understand how at the end of each chapter you get a little statistics screen, and one of the statistics is for damage taken. So if you get like 0 damage taken, it doesn't actually contribute to the rank whatsoever. There's nothing in terms of enemies killed. There's no kind of score system with the way the ranking works. Not that I even care, because rank is such a feeble way to indulge in the game. I really pity the fools who think that rank is everything in a game, and that you only go to games for ranks, and that ranks are somehow indicative of professional play. When most of the time, a lot of the creative strategies that people have, and a lot of the intelligent designs that people showcase with a game that don't get represented under an S rank run or an S plus run, they're not represented in the rank's requirements at all. Like, rank has never been representative of the game's true experience, ever. It's never been like that in many games. I mean, sometimes it is, but for the most part with Resident Evil, rank has never been representative of the game as a whole. And that's why I never indulge in rank, and I just find it very feeble when people just go to games only for rank. It's like, how can you embrace this kind of hollow leather and just use that to dictate whether you're a good player or not? And also, it helps fill the egos of people who just want to show their dicks and the like. Because I remember in one of my Assassin's Creed videos where I was just showing the guard quotes of specific guards, one of the guys decided to be a troll and just say, oh, I'm not good at Resident Evil because I've never indulged in mercenaries or all these other, like, stupid challenge runs and just gotten ranks. Like, why are you using that kind of game mode that is not representative of the full game, and why are you using rank that has nothing to do with how good I am at a game? I've done how many walkthroughs, I've showcased how many objective flaws with games, I've showcased how many problems with the game, I've showcased the game as a whole, I've showcased games at a deeper level. What does any of that have to do with rank? And when you're using it to fill your dick up, just to feel manly in that moment, that right there is just so hollow and so feeble. It's really feeble, guys. This is why I never indulge in rank. It's just such an outdated mentality that we need to get past. Like, rank has never been representative of the game at all. That's why I never indulge with it. And the only reason I'm even doing this S plus rank is just because, oh, it'll probably be helpful for people who want to get the challenge done and the like. Not because I actually care about the rank itself. Like I said, guys, this rank is not representative of Resident Evil 4 Remake as a whole. It's just a speedrun thing. It has nothing to do with the game at all. It has nothing to do with how badly balanced this game is. It has nothing to do with how badly paced the encounters are. It has nothing to do with how broken the hitboxes are on attacks. It has nothing to do with how absurd the HP is on the enemies. And with how much rank is associated with the most toxic people ever, why would I ever want to indulge with that? If that doesn't give you incentive to not indulge in rank or in any game that doesn't handle rank properly, I don't know what does. But, by the way, guys, this is the El Gigante, and I made a mistake. I forgot to repair my combat knife at the merchant because I'm so used to going into this fight not using the merchant that I didn't think to actually repair my combat knife. So I'm instead going to have to resort to the kitchen knives. And I know a lot of people use the sniper rifle against this guy, and they just immediately kill him within, like, 30 seconds, because the sniper rifle, when it's upgraded a lot, it does a lot of damage to his weak spot, and also to him. But, I didn't want to put up with that, and also, I just really wanted to showcase how badly designed this entire fight is, and how much I'm having to be so reliant upon exploits. Even if I can kill this guy super fast, it doesn't change what this fight is. In fact, if anything, making the player damage race this guy just goes to show how badly designed this entire fight is. They created a badly designed encounter, a fight that is honestly worse than Moreau, with some of the most poorly thought out attacks, with a really crappy environment to fight him in, that they turned it into a damage race with a sniper rifle, and it feels equally as stupid as what I'm doing right now, when I'm trying to fight this guy like a normal person. But unfortunately, because of how badly designed this entire fight is for normal play, I have to rely upon looping his stomp attack so that he eventually goes down and I can do the melee attack with the knife. Then I have to re-engage the loop again by exposing his parasite with 4 shots to the head with the shotgun, and just repeat the process over and over again. Like, this is just about as stupid as what it would be like if I was damage racing him with the sniper rifle. A damage race of a fight is as incompetently assembled as what it would be like just trying to do a boss normally, but you can't because of the number of bad hitboxes, the number of moves that don't fit the environment that you're in, the number of times where he catches you just out of the blue, and it's not up to you, it's up to him. If he decides to walk towards you, and even when you're running away, you cannot get away from certain moves. It's so awful. That is exactly why these two possible scenarios are equally as bad. And I'm still looping this guy's stomp attack, given that it's my only option, and I want to avoid as much bullcrap as possible because this guy has so many bad hitboxes. Not to mention, a lot of the long-range moves, even the close-range moves, have a tremendous amount of forward momentum, and he can easily push you into the walls of the arena because this arena isn't thought through very well to accommodate his moves. It's way too small. And when he does his 5-hit combo flail attack, when he does the slam move and then he follows it up with a counter attack that has phantom range, when he does all of these other moves that allow him to catch you even when you're running away, and it's all up to him, it's not up to you, it just becomes a broken, messy, frustrating encounter, disrespectful to the original version of Resident Evil 4. And also, I just want to mention that when you get to the part of the fight where his parasite is permanently exposed, the first time you expose the parasite, he will go down after a certain amount of time, and then you can melee it, and then after that, you'll want to use grenades to damage him, and I believe the grenades can damage the parasite, because on one of my other recordings, he did go into the animation that occurs when you shoot his parasite, and it occurred with the grenade. And then after you use the grenades, you can then use the flash grenades against him, and because I'm going to be able to craft a lot of flash grenades, it doesn't matter if I use them here. I mean, this fight just really feels like it's designed for flash grenades, and if he didn't automatically avoid having to drop down after a certain amount of time in this permanent Plaga phase, then you could probably do the fight without using flash grenades. I mean, you'd still have to deal with the knife durability on your knives and the potential for your knives to break, but even then, you wouldn't have to be so reliant upon flash grenades in the final part of this phase. Like, why is it that he just suddenly out of the blue doesn't choose to collapse after a certain amount of time? It makes no sense. And also, do you notice how he was flinching from the hand grenades? Or for some reason, in the Chapter 11 encounter with the El Gigante, they magically choose not to flinch from hand grenades. Hand grenades no longer stun them. Even heavy grenades don't stun them. Why? They are no different to this El Gigante. One is armored, and the other one is very similar to this guy. But all of a sudden, the El Gigante in that encounter don't get flinched by hand grenades. Why? It makes no sense, guys. It makes absolutely no sense. And that fight doesn't even matter much, because as long as you have at least one flash grenade, you can easily do that fight, and it's just a gimmick fight at that point, and it still doesn't change how bad the fight is. Like, regardless of whether you use flash grenades or not, it's still a very mundane fight. But we're now just moving on. There's going to be one Cormio that we can just skip the cutscene for and just get past him immediately. And then now we get to reunite with Ashley, the worst AI system ever in the entire Resident Evil series. And I'm actually going to take the time to implement a method that Johnny X showed, where he puts Ashley inside of a building, and he also makes sure that loose formation is active. And when you put Ashley inside of this building in the main village area, and you're running away from the enemies, she doesn't actually get grabbed, but it's hit and miss as to whether it will work or not. But I take that chance, because if I have to spend less time with Ashley, great, and I don't have to waste time just stealthing past the enemies, because the enemies, they path so poorly in the environment. The way new Capcom set up the stealth routes for the enemies is not very good, because they have so much trouble staying in a straight line, and then other times they choose to just turn in a certain direction for no reason and then resume their path. I've even seen moments where enemies path into bear traps, and this happens a lot in Chapter 6. Yeah, it's poorly handled, the pathing on the enemies. But we get past these guys right here. A lot of people choose to stealth that entire encounter, but I really don't see the point. It's a waste of time. Yes, it might be consistent, but the thing is, it's just a waste of time. And I made sure to repair the combat knife right there. And we're just going to skip to all of these treasure moments and then stealth kill this guy. And then we move on to the upper area where we are going to deal with this woman right over here who has the Molotov. But that barn over there, you saw it all the way to the right. That is the barn that you can hoist Ashley through, and as long as loose formation is active, she's not going to be so active in trying to get to you, although sometimes she will catch up to you. I don't really understand how that mechanic works. Like, the whole mechanic where Ashley speeds up in order to keep up with Leon, it is very sporadic with when she chooses to do it.
Okay.
Sometimes she does it, other times she doesn't, and I don't understand what dictates whether she speeds up or not. Is it when the enemies are nearby or not nearby? Is it just a random thing? It makes no sense. Like, why even have this be a thing? Like, she should always move at the fastest speed possible to keep up with Leon. Or just have her hold his hand. Is it that hard? I don't understand why it is so hard to program a companion AI to keep up with you. It makes absolutely no sense, guys, how they could look at the AI system at Resident Evil 4 OG and consider it bad, and then favor this incompetently assembled, squirrely, flimsy, lagging AI known as Ashley in this remake. It is terrible. Ashley is the worst AI system ever made in the entire Resident Evil series for this remake. It is unacceptable what they did with her. I believe she's closing in on me. I don't remember if this is the recording. And also, be careful of that guy with the hat. That guy, he can be very fast, and he can just grab you out of the blue. So it's best you prepare for the possibility of using the shotgun against him. And right there, Ashley was not grabbed, so I was able to get across the bridge. And now we have the dreaded cabin sequence. At least with flash grenades, it's okay, because at least with the flash grenades, I can use all of them against the brute. Given that there are also large resources here, I can craft more flash grenades when needed. I definitely feel like the sequence is designed to be a flash fest. It's just a spammy flash fest, because there are a lot of plagas that can appear, and you'll need to use flash grenades against them. And then when the brute appears, because there isn't really a special mechanic with him, unlike the brute that you encounter in the island area, where you can actually use the shotgun on his ammo pack and stun him and then kick him into a wall and then knife him. You're left with no choice but to just use flash grenades against him, and it won't even matter because you'll get a lot of large resources back, and there are flash grenade drops in the next areas. So, yeah, just do that. And it just sucks that they just designed the sequence mindlessly with flash grenades in mind, rather than actually refining the core gameplay and actually making the sequence complementary to a siege section. But the mechanics of Resident Evil 4 Remake just aren't built for these kind of siege moments. And even though you can get wooden boards, even though you can use your grenades to get rid of a large percentage of them, it still doesn't change what this is. It's still complementary to arbitrary damage values and when the game chooses to spawn plagas or not. It's just so mindless in its interpretation and with the way it's designed. I just don't really understand why a vast majority of the sequences in Resident Evil 4 Remake are just designed around mindlessly shooting enemies and just relying upon high damaging weapons to just shoot them, not even experiment with the game's mechanics, not even experiment with flinch animations. It's just mindlessly shooting enemies like what you were doing in Resident Evil 2 Remake if you were using the guns, for instance. Or even in Resident Evil 1 Remake. Like, all these games that are designed for knife only, and you're just, like, shooting them until they go down. Although in Resident Evil 1 Remake, this caused them to transform into Crimson Heads, and you could not even use the shotgun to decapitate zombies when they were on the ground. It was a really dumb handicap put upon the enemies to allow them to transform, and right there, that was very fortunate. Lewis saved me right there, and that is one of the few moments where Lewis can actually be good, but for the most part, he's another useless AI who's so passive. And I don't know why he's not more active when shooting, like in the original version of Resident Evil 4. But there is a plaga. There's two plagas, so luckily for me, he dropped down and he was exposed to the flash grenade. I'm getting more wooden planks, so I need to ensure that I board up the windows as fast as possible. There we go, and that right there, I thought the guy was still stunned, so I accidentally went into the animation of pushing the shelf, and he nearly copied just then, but I was very fortunate that he pushed me, and Leon recovered just fast enough to avoid the follow-up attack. That right there is the end of these enemies. I'm still going to use my knife against them just to speed up the sequence. They're spawning in right now, and unfortunately, because the cutscene played, it cancelled out my knife execution animation. That is a huge problem with this game. All these cutscenes that occur in the middle of gameplay, like in the village fight and also during the sequence, they can cancel out certain actions. Like, they can cancel out your melee attacks, they can cancel out your knife executions, they can cancel out mantle animations, and this can allow the enemies to get a cheap hit on you. It is so dumb. I've never heard of a Resident Evil game having this kind of problem. I don't even think the original version of Resident Evil 4 had this problem. If a cutscene played in the middle of a melee attack animation or a mantle animation, Leon would still continue the animation rather than just get interrupted. How is this an issue? Why have these cutscenes if it's going to lead to this kind of issue? I don't get it. Right now, the enemies are coming from the second floor. I'm just waiting for them to drop down, but I'm running low on shotgun ammo, and look at that. Leon gets flinched by an enemy that decided to flinch forward for no reason from the shotgun. Why is that a thing? I don't get it. It just looks so stupid. It makes no sense how a flinch animation generated by you causes an enemy to stumble into you and you get flinched. The developers are really trolling with that kind of design. That's the only reason I can think of as to why that is there. Like, the whole AI system that governs when Leon gets flinched is so badly designed in this game. But there is the brute. 3 knife executions are enough to finish him off, and the flash grenades will at least stun the other enemies. I will occasionally shoot this guy with the pistol just to damage him a bit more. I cannot believe this guy can take this many knife executions. It doesn't make any sense. And also, I just find it very funny how the animation that I did when stabbing him from behind is the same animation that occurs when you do a stealth kill on them, and somehow the stealth kill does more damage than the combat execution, even though it's the same animation. Like, the game doesn't give any logic as to why knife damage is just different between the different animations, even though Leon's doing the same kind of animation and he's stabbing them in the same area. I mean, I can appreciate the stealth kills instantly killing the enemies, but it should have a better reason for why the combat executions don't kill the enemies. Oh my god. Just the number of confusing designs that plague this pre-alpha and bring it down in quality is absolutely absurd. And I think this leads me on to another tangent I'd like to discuss. But a lot of people in the comments section voiced this question to me. Why are you still playing this pre-alpha even though you hate it? And I don't understand why there is anything to be confused about. Like, how can there be any confusion with that? There are many reasons why I'm still playing this pre-alpha even though I despise it. The first reason is, it is my duty as a Resident Evil player to indulge in a Resident Evil game. I'm so loyal to this series and I love this series a lot, that even with these crappy games, I will play them until I just feel satisfied with the content that I've released for them. And I feel like it's going to reach that point very quickly with this remake, because this remake is so devoid of replayability and the like I've already discussed before. And it just feels so stale and mundane. There's not a lot of sequences worth replaying. And like I said, the only sequence I ever replay is just Torres Mendez's boss fight. Everything else is just so self-explanatory and so basic, you never feel the need to replay it. And even replaying the full game, it doesn't feel that entertaining on repeat playthroughs. That's how badly designed this entire game is. That's how lacking in content and creativity this entire pre-alpha is. And that is just how much this game has drained me. And moving on to the next reason, when you have people like Under the Mayo or all the other toxic fans defending this game, I'm not going to let those kind of ignorant, foolish, inconceivable mentalities saturate the landscape of Resident Evil 4 Remake. I have to balance that kind of landscape out by introducing my objective analysis and critique of Resident Evil 4 Remake that actually comes from a player who has heavily invested their time into this game and are not relying upon such outdated mentalities and stupidity when delivering criticisms towards this pre-alpha. I'm not going to let that landscape be saturated by those idiots. And another thing as well is that I'm going to be doing a review of this game. How can I possibly do a review of this pre-alpha if I don't play this pre-alpha enough? If I don't play it enough, then I'm not going to be able to build a strong foundation of what I'm trying to say about this pre-alpha. And how am I supposed to call out the developers or all the idiots that defend this game or all the bad designs of this pre-alpha if I don't play it? Like, it's all self-explanatory. Like, I shouldn't have to explain why I am still indulging with this. I'm not going to give up on this game and just move on to another game. I'm still going to devote as much time as possible to content and to really, like, shattering all of the pitiful foundations that this game is built upon and all of the stupid arguments that people deliver when trying to defend this pre-alpha. This is what I am doing as my duty as a Resident Evil player. It's that easy to understand. But having said all that, we now have this stupid sequence, but I did something different. I did purchase from the merchant, and I got the riot gun, and I'm not really going to be able to put the riot gun to good use here, aside from getting rid of Ganado that are getting in the way, but my strategy is still the same. I know a lot of people just use the bolt gun and the explosive bolts to get rid of these Bella Sisters immediately, but I didn't want to waste money on the bolt gun at all, because I don't really see the point in that. Every other weapon is just a lot better for those kind of situations later on in the game. So instead, I'm just going to use the old method of just using the leash to my advantage. And even if I were to just stand my ground in that previous part, there are too many enemies to deal with. Why on earth would I want to go through this many enemies and just waste all this ammunition when I can just use this leash method that allows me to get rid of a couple of enemies and not waste so much ammo? I mean, it's that simple. I mean, I don't really see why anyone would ever stand their ground when there are this many enemies and the base mechanics are so unreliable. And everything is just a damage sponge. Everything's so reliant upon power upgrades. And in the context of S+, it doesn't matter how much time I'm spending in this area, because in the later chapters, I'll be able to use other exploits, I'll be able to use hidden mechanics that were intended by the developers to speed up certain sequences that were not afforded to me in my previous worst through. So it doesn't matter in the long run. I still need to get rid of a lot more enemies, because every time I'm coming back over here, I'm somehow getting put into combat. So this is what I said before in my previous worst through. There are times when you have to kill additional Ganado because they're somehow seeing you, or they're somehow knowing that you're in the area, and so you have to get them out of the way so that you can be in a stealth profile and use the crank in order to get Ashley out of the locker, because she always comes out of the locker every time you put in the crank, and I don't understand why. And I don't understand why they replace the lockers so poorly. Why can't they have a locker right next to the door? And also, why can't you instruct Ashley to get on the crank and then defend her from the enemies? I mean, there is so much they could have done to make the sequence better and not be so reliant upon exploits, but they didn't even try. They didn't try at all, just like how they didn't even try with the rest of this remake, this remilk or demake, like people have said to me before, and those are really great terms. Remilk especially is a really fun term. It's definitely the perfect representation of what this entire remake is. It's just a remake milking on fan nostalgia and just relying upon the iconography of Resident Evil 4 to just bringing the big bucks, you know? And now we're just running from the villagers right now. So these guys will die very fast from the riot gun as well as from the normal shotgun. So you don't have to worry so much. And also, I saw that Carcinogen SDA used the riot gun against Bitores Mendez in his part of his walkthrough, and the riot gun is very powerful against Bitores Mendez, only I think he upgraded his riot gun so he was able to kill Bitores Mendez a bit faster. And shooting the eyeball actually does a lot of damage to Bitores Mendez, but it doesn't matter so much in my case because regardless of what you do, you're going to have not as much ammo, but you'll still be able to get a lot of ammo back for the later chapters anyway. But now we have Bitores Mendez, so I'm just going to do the same trick as before. I'm going to stand right in front of him and just crouch under his grab. It's the only attack he does at close range, and it's clear that developers made this as such just to allow you to cheese him, so that you'll likely have more ammunition for the later chapters. But right now, I don't have enough shotgun ammo to deal with the eyeball now that he's in its weakened state. I did get large resources, so I'll be able to craft more flash grenades, and there is a flash grenade in this room. And I believe in my previous worst through where I didn't use the merchant, I forgot to get the flash grenade from here. I could be wrong though, but just make sure you don't miss out on the kitchen knife and the flash grenade in this room. But eventually he's going to go down. He's doing his judgment moves, so just climb up on a ladder. But something worth noting, you can actually parry Bitores Mendez's tentacle attacks when you're up on this floor, and the parry timing is actually very lenient. And this is another thing that's very confusing about this remake. There are certain encounters on this game, or like certain encounters with single bosses, like for instance Krauser, where the parry timing is adjusted. So like they adjusted the parry timing for mutated Krauser in this final fight with him, but they didn't adjust the parry timings whatsoever in the first and second phase encounters with Krauser, which is good, but then they changed it for phase 3 Krauser, which doesn't make any sense. Yet here, they didn't change the parry timings whatsoever for Bitores Mendez, and the parry timings are very lenient so that there's good detection, and it's all because the parries are classed as red counters rather than just normal counters. I don't really understand this at all. Why is it so different with Bitores Mendez here, and like why are the developers so divisive and fragmented with how they choose to design the parry timings for certain bosses? It makes absolutely no sense, and that level of fragmentation is all indicative of a development team that didn't know what they were doing, or they weren't communicating with each other properly, and this kind of fragmentation led to the pitiful state that this remake is in. And like I said before, guys, the development of Resident Evil 4 remake was nowhere near as troubled as what it was with Resident Evil Village, and yet somehow this game is in a worse state than Resident Evil Village was. Like, Resident Evil Village's development had to stop for a month because of COVID. And this game never had any problems like that. The only problems it had were the switching of roles between M3 and Division 1, where Division 1 of New Capcom took control rather than M3, who handled Resident Evil 3 Remake. And also, they had 3 different development teams handling the village, the island, and also the castle. And those are the only things I can think of that can possibly hinder or ruin the development of Resident Evil 4 Remake. But I don't think they're as severe as just stopping development for a month. And yet this game is in a worse state. Like, how does that make any sense, guys? And as far as I can tell, that the marketing for Resident Evil 4 Remake was nowhere near as intense as what it was with Resident Evil Village, so they had plenty of funds to allocate to this game. But this game is more broken, this game is more rushed, this game has more bugs, I would say, than Resident Evil Village. This game is so brain dead than Resident Evil Village. How is this the case? Like, this game is just shattering my world and shattering the knowledge that I have with how game development works. And I originally thought that Resident Evil Village would allow me to understand how game development works, but this game has just added so much more confusion to how game development works. It really makes no sense, guys. But now we have the second phase of Bitores Mendez. Like I said, guys, Bitores Mendez is the only boss I ever replay. Aside from the first El Gigante, every other boss is just boring to fight, and there's no incentive to deal with them. But Bitores Mendez, he's still dumb with the way he's presented because he doesn't have that same imposing nature like what he was like in the original version of Resident Evil 4. He's instead just a cliched anime encounter with the fire everywhere, and he pulls barrels out of nowhere, and he's throwing all these boards at you, and he's just spouting nonsense like Father Mozgul did in Berserk. It's just a really poor presentation of Torres Mendes. This is never how I imagined Torres Mendes to be in a remake. It is really insulting. But at the same time, he's definitely the better boss of the game because he's the one boss that has designs that work, and his moveset is good enough to complement the game's core designs, but it still doesn't excuse the bad hitboxes on certain attacks, or like how the fire can stun you and it messes with your movement and it can make it impossible to get away from Torres Mendes, not to mention he can push you into the fire. And I know a lot of people choose to stay up on the second floor, but I like using the bottom level because he doesn't have many bullcrap moves, and it's a lot easier to avoid his attacks, I would say, because you have more room to run to the sides, and you can also kind of touch the fire on the left and not take any damage to avoid his other moves, even though you don't really need to touch the fire. There's actually a safer spot on that left-hand side that you can stand at to avoid the thrust that he does. But it's pretty self-explanatory to understand, and you can also run to the right to avoid that thrust. And I'm amazed he's still persisting. The health of the bosses and the enemies is just randomized every time. I mean, they have the same HP, but the damage you do is random every time, and the circumstances where you can do increased damage to them doesn't make any sense. So that's probably why this fight is taking as long as it is, although it might be because I'm not using the red 9, but I don't think it would have mattered so much. But that is the end of this video. Stay tuned for the future parts. Thank you all for watching, and you take care now.